Actually, let's stay in the U.S. Capitol and speak to Rich Outzen, who's a retired U.S. colonel, now a geopolitical consultant. Rich, welcome to the program. It was thought that things would become more simple as the summit approached in Vilnius, but they appear to be getting more complicated.
Indeed. There's a lot of, for anytime you have 30, 31 countries, in this case, if we count Sweden as a candidate, also involved with these talks, there's a lot of behind the scenes haggling, dealing, working through documents and decisions to be taken. So this should be the complex stage. Hopefully they'll put on something of a simplified display of unity at the actual summit once that starts tomorrow. But I think it's sort of a subtle jab for Ankara to point out, for President Erdogan to point out this linkage to EU membership, because I think Ankara has been very displeased with this linkage of the F-16 deal, which should be a fairly straightforward transaction, to other issues like Swedish accession. And even if the White House has linked it and the State Department has said there's no linkage, you can go even beyond that and look at what Congress has said, which is that even if Turkey approves Swedish accession, that might not be enough to do the F-16 deal. So I think it's a subtle jab back at that, saying, look, if we're going to do a deal on Swedish accession, let's look at the trilateral memorandum, and it has to be based on progress against PKK. If we're going to do an F-16 deal, let's do that as a straightforward business deal. Let's stop playing the linkage game, because we can play that too.
Okay, let's look at the summit itself and what lies in store for Ukraine. The word coming out from Ukraine is that Volodymyr Zelensky, the president, is not happy with NATO because he believes that the alliance could be giving his country a lot more military assistance. Do you think we're going to see something concrete come out of the summit regarding Ukraine's security? It not necessarily meaning that it's going to join NATO, because of course it can't while it's at war. That could come afterwards. But in terms of Ukrainian security, can NATO deliver something that Kiev wants?
I think so. We've seen out of the United States, Germany, and a couple of other countries, since the Russian invasion ramped into this new phase in 2022, we've seen a reticence to give the best and the most military assistance early on. There's been sort of a metered approach to it. I think the logic behind that was to avoid signaling escalation to the Russians. But in fact, it's been very frustrating for Ukraine. They did not get MLRS, the multiple launch rocket system, or HIMARS, until very late in the game. They did not get approval for heavy tanks and things like that. So Ukraine should be frustrated by this. I think it's been made very clear that there won't be a formal announcement of pathway to accession. But what I expect in its place is that NATO will make a major statement of solidarity with Ukraine and give a de facto guarantee of continued security assistance and more weapons and more training until Ukrainian sovereignty is assured. Now, accession talks will have to wait, I think, based on what President Biden said, until after this war ends, until after there's some sort of a settlement for it. But you can signal that it is a virtual certainty down the road by making a major statement of security guarantee. And I think that's what we'll see coming out of this summit.
Rich, finally, an impossible question, and I'm going to have to ask you to be brief, which is an impossible request as well. You're a former U.S. colonel. Do you see the Ukraine war continuing at this time next year?
If I had to bet, I would say yes. I think that this war shows no signs of either side being exhausted just yet. So I think we're in for, I think it's fair to say another year of war.
Rich, thanks for the brevity with that last answer. Really appreciate it. Interesting analysis, and thanks for sharing it with us. Rich Outzen.